Hey, welcome to the Ratitude Podcast. I am so excited. I think I say that every single time, but it's true every single time. I keep having these most amazing guests who tend to live in, at least my definition, of Ratitude lives. And today is another one. Heather Russell, coming from tornado-stricken Orlando, but she really lives up in Buffalo, so she must be at least warm. I met Heather on one of my yacht cruises in Croatia, and then she came on last year's to Greece, and she's going to come on another one pretty soon, right?
Yes. Yes.
Heather Russell, she's a brilliant mind. And, that's what I really like to ask people in our questions here is how their mind developed. But first, let's welcome Heather Russell coming to us from Orlando.
Hello, Robert. Thank you for having me. I am super excited to be here and to talk about anything that comes up.
Have you seen that guy, Zach Garofalo? I don't know how to say his name. Between Two Ferns?
No.
Have you seen? Oh, it is hilarious. He asks the most bizarre questions. Like he'll say, okay, Heather, I hear that when you were on that cruise with Robert, that you were afraid of the water. And so you wore a vest. But that's all you wore.
And then Heather would say, that's not true.
Zach makes up stuff all the time. I think I do too.
Yeah.
But anyway, tell us a little bit about you. You were a dancer. You had this dance studio. You break dancer. You worked for Target. You managed like their whole business. And now you're doing some really interesting things on your own. Whatever you'd like to start as an introduction, tell us about.
Sure, absolutely. So I guess I will start with saying that I've always been very interested in doing things. So like I have ideas and then there's not a lot of space between the idea and the action. And so that's really what's led me to having a life that I think you look at and say, hey, this is full. So yes, I owned a dance studio for 12 years in Buffalo, New York, and Verve Dance Studio. We were actually the longest running B-boy jam in the country. So every month for 12 years, we had B-boy battles. And really, we just built this amazing community. And that is something that to this day I'm very proud of. Now, it wasn't Target, it was Verizon. But I also...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
They're the same, aren't they?
For about that same period of time, I was a VP and I ran 3 Verizon wireless stores. So very, very different than this dance studio, but lots of experience and I had a lot of fun there. And I'm a mom. I have 3 children. My youngest child has special needs, and that really challenged me to take a look at who I am and what my goals are and how I was living my life. And I gotta say, it was the biggest blessing for me because it taught me how to really become more efficient, but also just have more joy. And I think maybe that's something a lot of people miss. So I think we could definitely dive into that.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Joy. How do you find joy? I mean, like, and really, what I want to do is ask you how you found it, and if there's some clues that you can give some of our audience members that may not be living in joy right now. What could they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I want to say is that it didn't come naturally for me. When I was younger as a child, I would find humor in things, but I can't say that I remember being joyful. And even as a young adult, and then moving into my career, having my family, I can remember moments, but I wouldn't say that anyone who knew me would say, oh yeah, Heather's a joyful person. Maybe focused, intentional, but not joyful. To be honest, the turning point for me was my youngest daughter. She has special needs. She learns differently. And yet as I observed her with this genuine curiosity, which I'm a big fan of curiosity, what I realized is that she paid attention to all of these things that most of us just kind of go through our day without even noticing. Like she laughs uncontrollably at the sound of a zipper. right? So like just zip, somebody blowing their nose, just these things that we don't pay any attention to. She will just laugh hysterically at them because she thinks about them differently. And I'll tell you what I learned from observing her was that there are so many things throughout every day of our lives that are funny, that if we are present and in the moment, we will find joy in them if we're not just trying to rush through it, like if we're actually present. And then you think about it from the standpoint of actually, that sounds funny, right? A zipper does sound funny, right? A sneeze does sound funny. And so, what I found is that by slowing down and paying attention to those moments and allowing myself to find them funny, they began to pile on top of each other. And then rather than being a moment here or there, it just kind of opened up my personality to being one where I realized I can create moments of joy. So rather than just being an observer, I then began to create the joy and look for moments where I could impact or create joy, not only for myself, but for other people.
Did you manifest joy or funniness, or did you look at things and they happen to be joyful and funny?
So when you ask me that question, my mind immediately starts dissecting like how those two things go together and which one came
Right.
first, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think in my personal experience, I was an observer first, right? So I just began noticing. I observed my daughter, and it allowed me to notice pockets of joy that were already there, that were not being created by me, but that I hadn't noticed before.
Yeah.
And then when I realized how much was already there, I realized that, hey, I can use the same approach that has worked for me in creating or manifesting, like in business or in money. I can actually do that when it comes to my feelings and joy.
Right.
So then I think
Right.
one led to the other.
Okay, so for our audience, most of our audience probably doesn't have a special needs child. So what could they do then to explore this world of more joyfulness?
I'm sure that many people have looked at meditation, visualization, like various different tools that we use. And I think maybe sometimes what gets missed, and I know in my work with my clients now, they sometimes forget that we're doing these things for a specific result. Some people need to calm their minds, become present in their body. So I think joy is one of those things where you just slow down. And the first thing that you do is you start to connect the activities of your day, right? Or things that you're doing with the intention of bringing joy and finding joy. So if you're someone who meditates, allowing yourself to use meditation as a way to be present and then to specifically look around for joy or for opportunities to create joy.
Before we started, you told me that there was a tornado yesterday there in Orlando.
Yeah.
So, and that you could see it out your window. So did you find joy in a tornado?
Well,
Did you see the tornado?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't actually see it. Somebody
Okay.
saw it when it was reported, but I didn't see it. What's interesting about that is I was out and about when I got the notification that, hey, 15 minutes, it's going to be madness. So I'm coming back to my Airbnb, and then I'm finding the irony, and I start laughing because I'm like, oh, this particular visit, I chose in a condo on the 30th floor. And for a
Oh.
tornado, you're supposed to be lower level, right? So I was actually laughing that, this timing ironic. Now I went through asking myself, should I go to the lobby? Am I safe? And then I realized, I am safe. There's never been a skyscraper or high rise that's been taken down by a tornado. So then what I did was I just kind of leaned into it, and I realized I have these beautiful windows. I stood back, but I just wanted to observe, and I got all this beautiful footage of lightning and the storm. And you know what? It came and went in like 20 minutes. And honestly, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the way this conversation has gone, and we've had a lot of conversations where they just kind of go and
That's
never know where they're going to go, and they're always kind of cool. But you know that I'm now into the Abraham Hicks world,
Mhm.
and what they say is that to feel what you're feeling, and if it's a positive feeling, keep thinking about that, and if it's not, if you're feeling a little bit down or sad or whatever, change your feeling,
Mhm.
and you could borrow from something. And so as you've been talking, it's kind of interesting to me because I think we all arrive at a place differently. And I've arrived at this place now through the Abraham Hicks world, just choosing joy all the time.
Yeah.
And people could say to me that you're joyful all the time, but shoot, they hear a 30-second or a 1 minute clip on Facebook or something like that. They don't see me the whole time, and we're not always smiling. And actually, I've got the flu right now, and so I'm faking it that I'm actually feeling good right now. But part of that is because I'm getting to talk to you, so that's pretty cool too.
Well, you know what I find interesting about what you said is that I think for some of us on our journey, there can be a gap between when we hear people say something like, oh, well, just
Mm,
change how you feel, and this sense of, well, I don't want to be fake, right? Like,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think that there can be this gap in understanding what does it actually mean to choose joy. There's been a phrase culturally in the development world and really on social media for a little while now about toxic positivity, right? And the whole idea that, well, you can't just ignore things and just fake it, right? So I want us to chat for a minute about that space in between because I think that's very valuable for people. Is that cool with you?
It sure is. I've never heard of toxic positivity.
Yeah. So that phrase, I think, gets used a lot when people feel like there's this sense of ignoring things and just
Hmm.
maybe like, oh, almost like a Pollyanna, I think used to be
Yeah,
a different expression for it. And so
yeah.
for me, what I found is that choosing a different feeling doesn't mean that I'm ignoring anything. It simply means that I've developed the ability to think about what's causing the feeling that I'm having. And
Hmm.
then I have a process, I call it IAE. I work with my clients, and it just stands for identify, acknowledge, and express. And that's where if I'm able to identify what I'm feeling, like for example, with the tornado, am I safe? Do I need to move? Should I be in the lobby? Like I'm recognizing that there's a little bit of anxiety over my safety, right? But then by acknowledging it, I'm able to actually have conscious and intentional thoughts around it. And then because I've come to that reason that I am safe, I'm able to choose curiosity and joy and enjoy the actual storm rather than be afraid of it. So I think this space that sometimes confuses people is understanding that you're not ignoring things. You're internally processing with space. And that's one of the great things that meditation or visualization can teach us to do is it can teach us to slow down the response time between our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions so that we can intentionally choose how we feel and then how we behave coming from those feelings.
Tell us about your educational background because it's pretty unique. And you're like one of the smartest people I know
So,
and got there very differently than most people.
yes. So, where do you want me to begin on that?
The day you were born,
Okay.
wherever you think is appropriate.
When people ask me about my education, I honestly think that the way that I typically answer that is that I'm self taught. However, I learn from others, right? So I graduated from high school. I do not have a college degree. I lasted like 3 months in college. So I started and I very quickly realized that it wasn't for me. So I am a big fan personally. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but I'm a big fan of being curious about something and
Hmm.
then diving deep into that curiosity. So I have always been comfortable reading books, going to seminars, like now the internet's wonderful source of information, but really learning to think so that you can dissect what is for you and what isn't for you. So, as I've always had an interest in working for myself and having businesses over the years, that's just really how I've learned how to do anything. is I'm curious about it, I dive into it, and I keep learning. So I would also say that I don't look at education as something that someone else can give me, although I can learn from everyone. I look at it as something I take personal responsibility for continuing to do.
Yeah, you have, and you've used this word with me before, curiosity, and I love it. It's kind of like my word for 2024. Um, but how did that develop for you? Is that something that you're just born with, curiosity, or did you develop it, or where did that come from?
So I would say that I do believe most of us are born curious. You know, children and babies are naturally curious. I think that some of us have childhood environments that are more supportive of that curiosity. And I will say that in my early childhood education, which it was in a typical public school, I was given some privileged opportunities to work one on one. So even in grade like 3 through 7, I was given access to a special teacher, and a lot of that time was spent around projects that I was curious about. So
Ah,
she would really like just completely be supportive of, okay, you're interested in space, or okay, you're interested. I didn't like dolls. I was not into dolls as a kid, but I wanted to build a doll house because I was very interested in engineering and construction and even decorating. I had a lot of early childhood influences that were very supportive of my curiosity, which I don't necessarily think all children and their school experiences have. But I do think as a society and as parents, grandparents, I think that we can do a better job of helping to nurture that natural curiosity in children so that they continue to take a curiosity in life, but also responsibility for pursuing their curiosities.
yeah. How did you get one on one with a teacher in third through seventh grade?
Well, so it's kind of a funny story. And I actually, well, I'm just going to tell it. So it's not something I share with a lot of people. So when I went to kindergarten orientation, my parents went with me, and all the kids are there with their parents. And I was sitting in the corner, and I kind of had an attitude. And the kindergarten teacher came up to me, and she thought I was being shy. So she was being very like soft spoken and very trying to ease me into the group. I didn't have as much emotional intelligence back then, so I was a bit direct with her. And I just looked at her and I said, I don't belong here. I already know how to read, I already know how to write. And then I was a bit of a jerk because I just looked at her and I said, you can't teach me anything that I don't already know. So that got me sent to the principal's office. Thankfully, the, the principal was open minded and listened to 5-year-old Heather, and they brought in someone to test my educational level. And after doing that, they agreed that I didn't have to go to kindergarten, and then they actually brought in a special teacher to work with me.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
It's definitely, you know what, to be honest, it's something I recognize now was an amazing privilege and opportunity. And I
Yeah.
appreciated it then, but it took me a while. It really wasn't until I was an adult. And then even in my coaching services that I have now, where I was able to recognize the difference that that really made for me.
So let's talk about your coaching services. What do you
Yeah.
do?
So I have a business called Onward Endeavors. And really the goal, even in that name, is to be able to help people get from wherever they are to where they want to be. So I have business services and I have personal services. And the idea is really that sometimes people don't recognize that all of us have moments of pause in our life. We've been doing something, and then we get to this moment where we look around and we're like, wait a minute, I'm not where I thought I would be, or I'm not happy. Like I'm doing all the things that I that I said I wanted to do, but somehow I ended up like not where I thought I would be. And so Onward Endeavors is really about helping individuals and business owners take a really clear look in the mirror so that they can make sure that their life is lining up with who they want to be and how they want to live.
Okay. And so how do you start that? Do people do an assessment? Do you talk with them? Do you use tools? What's your process?
So, my process is for an individual, I would have them book a call with me. And at this point, I've gotten very good and I'm very quick at identifying someone's personality and whether or not I'm going to be able to help them. So, through a series of questions, I kind of look at the level of self awareness they already have or don't have. And then we kind of go from there in terms of where they're at. And if I feel confident that I can get them from where they are to where they want to be, then we work together. And if I don't, then I usually will give them some suggestions on other things that I think are going to be beneficial for them. With a business, it's similar. But to be honest, with business owners, I really take a look at their values and their goals, and who they are as a person. I scrutinize them a little more because I am really confident. I know that every business I work with scales, and I kind of have my own values about the type of businesses and the type of business owners that whose lives I want to impact.
So whose are they? What kind of people do you want to work with?
I want to work with people who genuinely care about their contribution to the world, right?
Okay.
So I want to work with people who understand that, yes, I have my own financial goals, but I also care about who I am and the impact I have on the people around me. One of the reasons I love working with business owners is because most people on surveys hate their bosses. And most people, especially in the US, spend a lot of time at work. And so when I was looking at my skills and where I feel I can have a big impact is really in making better bosses and the trickle down impact that has on people.
Ooh, I had this boss. I'm no longer working for them, and I'm not going to say because I've already said too much about him. But, it's so funny because I read Alison Armstrong's Keys to the Kingdom and Queen's Code and learned a lot about him from those books.
Okay.
And I go, oh, now I know why he's that way. I don't like it, but I learned why he was that way. Huh. Okay, so let's role play. Let's say I'm a client. I'm a client. I come to you and I say, Heather, onward bound. Take me to the next level.
Okay. So first, before we would even get to that point, I would want to know, what are you struggling with?
Oh, I am struggling with now trying to connect to God. That's what I want to do. I decided I want to connect to God and feel it. People go to church and they sit there and go like that and they feel it. Or a lot of the events I go to now, Joe Dispenza event, people feel these things. I don't feel anything. I want to feel those things. I want to feel connected to source, universe, God, truth, higher power, whatever it is.
So how would you know if that was happening?
I'd hear words.
You would hear words?
Yeah, like Abraham Hicks. They talk through Esther Hicks. I guess I want a channel.
Okay. So this is interesting. This conversation is totally going someplace else. To be honest with you, if that's what you actually brought to me, I would probably turn you down as a client.
Okay. All right.
Because part of what I would be looking for is but I'll walk you through my process anyways for the sake of what I'm doing. So the first thing that I would do is I'd be looking for clarity inside of you. I'd be looking to help you find clarity. For example, the first thing you said was connection to God. But then as you start talking, what I hear you saying is feeling. You're saying, I don't feel. And yet you're paying attention to other people and you think that they're feeling something that you're not, right?
Feeling and hearing.
Yes. So I would be looking at that with you to, first of all, establish clarity around what it is that you're actually seeking. And to be honest, the first thing that comes to mind for me is your connection with self. Right? So how can you connect with God? if you're not connected with yourself, right? How can you feel and hear if you aren't paying attention to your own voice, or you're not able to hear your own voice and thoughts? So, based on just what you shared, that's probably where I would dive into that. Okay. Now, the reason that I say, I probably wouldn't accept you as a client is not because there's not stuff there that I think I could help with, but that ultimately I would be looking for, when I work with someone, for me, it's not, did I create a moment of awareness, but it's a guarantee that I can get the result they're looking for. And I can't guarantee that you will become a Chandler, right? Like, I can't guarantee that. So
Heather,
I know.
I want a guarantee.
So that's kind of like just the difference that I would look at if you were
Yeah,
coming to me. Does that make sense?
it does. Okay. I'll try a different one then.
Okay.
I'm watching Ozark right now,
Okay.
and there's only like one or two episodes left. And Jason, have you heard of this show?
Yes. I haven't seen it,
Okay,
but I've
so
heard of it.
okay, Jason Bateman's he's a money launderer for the Mexican cartel, and he just went down to Mexico to take over because the bad guy is in jail, and he's going to get him out of jail. But he's in this dilemma that he can't get out of because he started just kind of doing this, and before he knew it, if he leaves, he's going to be killed. So, Heather, I'm coming to you. I need to get out of the cartel.
Okay. So you really have a way of choosing scenarios that I'm going to turn down.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point because if you wouldn't turn it down, you would probably be killed, or I would be
Yeah.
killed. Yeah, I would be killed because I shared with you that I'm in the cartel
I'd
now.
be like, look,
But
I
I'm
think
not. I'm not. All you
you're trying to
cartel
get
people,
us
I'm
both
not.
killed.
I'm not in the cartel. I'm a
Yeah.
good guy.
Now, what I will say though, because this is what that question brings up for me, and this is a quite popular topic with personal clients, with professional clients, with business owners, boundaries, right? So often, I would say most of the time when people are coming to me, the people that I choose to work with and the ones that I choose not to work with, a large part of the problem in the scenario is a lack of boundaries. And I'll tie that back into your first question about connection with God, where I talk about connection with self, is that it's really hard to move forward any type of onward endeavor if we're not clear about who we are, who we're trying to be. Because if we're always growing, then it's not just about who we are right now, it's about who we're becoming. And most people are struggling with that forward movement because they don't know how to set boundaries around what's not for them. They don't know how to say no to opportunities or to people or to clients, right? A lot of business owners think they just, yes, yes, they're going to pay me. So I say yes, no, right? Or if you're looking for a relationship, then you're like, okay, like you're saying yes to these people when in actuality part of you knows that that's not the right place for you, or they're not the right person for you. So a lot of the moving forward conversation, regardless of what the end goal is around building confidence of self, connection with self, so that you really know what is for you and what's not for you, and then being consistent in that confidence so that you can set boundaries around what's not for you.
So, Heather, who are you?
I'm going to say the first thing that came to my mind, which is forest fairy.
Forest Fairy.
I am a
Okay.
forest fairy, and what that means to me is I am a person that loves nature. I find my peace, my spirituality, my connection to self and to God in nature. I am a fairy in the sense of the word that I really just enjoy joy. So
Yeah.
the idea
Yeah.
of flying around and like, coming over here and bringing some joy and bringing some magic and then having this conversation. Like, a couple months ago when you and I had dinner and it's like we hadn't seen each other in a while and we just come together for a couple hours. I'm always like, well, what can I bring to this person? Right. So in
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
mind, a forest fairy is like, that's me. I'm flying in for a moment and I'm bringing some joy and I'm bringing some wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I'm moving on and spreading the wisdom and spreading the joy.
So where would the boundary be on something like that? Like you can't go and bring fairy dust to everyone.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was the boundary is when I fly away, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think that boundaries is an ongoing lesson that
Mm-hmm.
most of us that get good at boundaries have gotten there because we had situations where we weren't good at boundaries.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think first recognizing that boundaries are not necessarily closed doors. They're not necessarily rigid for everyone. And that
Mm-hmm.
depending on the relationship, then you have a different type of boundary with different people. And so I think that's
Yeah.
the first thing to be aware of is that
Mm-hmm.
usually when people start learning or thinking about boundaries, the initial impression is that it's this harsh thing, like just no. But boundaries are very fluid. They can change and they can change with the same person. The more you get to
Mm-hmm.
know them, the more you identify how you feel. And so I'll use a business example. Boundaries with employees. Most of us have an initial concept of professional boundaries. Over time in a small business, if you're spending, 5, 6, 7 years working with someone, you will develop a different boundary with different employees based on their personality, also based on their performance. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday and we were talking about how that's just naturally part of what happens because you have different trust levels with different employees. You look at their performance and then you're like, okay, I'm completely comfortable with this employee working from home. I'm not comfortable with that employee working from home, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
recognize where internally you feel different based on your own sense of boundaries. And that definitely applies, in our personal lives as well.
So you're in Orlando. Why are you in Orlando?
I am currently working with a wonderful company called Florida Event Decor. And so they are a new client of mine, just a wonderful company that provides decorations for events. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
exciting, very fast paced, and they've had a recent ownership change. So I'm here helping them transition and get ready to scale up. So they're already pretty big, but the owner has a lot of ambitious goals. So I'm here to help make those things happen.
Do they decorate Barbie houses?
They absolutely could decorate Barbie houses. Yes, we
Yeah.
actually we do have some Barbie themed decorations for events. Are you going to build a Barbie house?
No, I'm not. Although Malibu's my town. Malibu Barbie, or there's a house in Malibu, a Malibu Barbie house. I think it's pink.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Although I'm not a
anyway,
Barbie expert, honestly, I got in trouble as a kid because I melted them in the oven.
why did you melt a Barbie doll in the oven?
I wanted Matchbox cars.
Oh, you could have been in the cartel. That's what they do. Every time they kill someone, they bought a crematorium and they go cremate them.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll
So
I'll keep that in mind. I don't really
you
think it's
should,
the professional direction I'm looking for, but it's
you mean you have a boundary around that?
I do. I do. Yes.
All right. So Heather, what's next for you in the future? What do you want to do? You're still young and you've got this whole world in front of you. What's onward bound for you?
Yeah. So this year specifically, it's funny because one of my very first goals was to start being on more podcasts.
Oh,
So check, getting that
okay.
done. There's quite a few books that I will have coming out over the next a couple of years. And what I'm finding with my clients, and I'm sure everyone that consults or coaches is finding the same thing, there's so much repetition in what we do. And sometimes I think people wonder if there's enough space for their viewpoint. And what I'm finding is that each one of us has such unique life experiences that even though we might talk about the same concept, we approach it from such a different perspective that there's a lot of value to be had in that. And what I'm finding is that a lot of people, although everybody watches videos and listens to podcasts, a lot of people are still interested in reading books, and it's a different angle of stories. And so I'll be kind of branching myself out a little bit more on that. I do have a background as a writer as well, so I'm very excited about that. And I'm also diving deeper into one of the programs that I offer is that I take self-employed people and turn them into business owners. And so I'm going to be investing more into those programs. There's so many people, so many small business owners that are working harder than they need to. And I'm really looking to help them create more comprehensive lifestyles for themselves and their families. You know, I have a strong passion for business ownership, and yet what I find is that most business owners, they work 24/7 and they don't have the time to spend with their families. And
Yeah.
I am a big believer in family time. You know, those
Yeah.
relationships are very important. And so I really want to put the skill set that I have into the areas where I feel like, hey, if I can help business owners be better bosses, if I can help them have more time with their families, then I personally am going to feel like I'm, having a good impact with the skills that I've developed.
What are your books going to be about?
So I have I think the first one that is going to come out is going to be called How to Finish Raising Yourself. And this is really going to focus on when I talked about learning and being a lifelong learner and taking responsibility for your own learning. This book is really going to be about how do you take responsibility for who you are. So I run into all the time the way that our culture kind of looks at, oh, well, now you're an adult, you're supposed to know what to do. And it's just not that way. And I feel
Yeah.
like people in their 20s and 30s, even 40s, have so much pressure that they're putting on themselves, thinking that they need to have already know how to do all these things. And so what I really want to talk about is how do we just take ownership and responsibility for finishing our development rather than thinking that our parents raised us and we're done, right?
So have you done that? Have you finished your development?
I don't know that anyone finishes their development, but what I will say is that I picked up where my parents left off, and then I've taken myself from there.
How do people reach out to you? How do they find out about you? If they want your consulting services, if they want to work with you personally or professionally, business wise, how could they reach you?
Absolutely. So my website is onward-endeavors.com. You can also find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Onward Endeavors on YouTube. It's Heather Russell. So, and my email address is it's heatherrussell@gmail.com.
Is there another Heather Russell that you had to put a "it's" in front of it?
There's actually quite a few of them. One of
Oh
them
no!
is a folk singer. There's actually a couple singers, one in
Oh,
Nashville and one in Toronto. They're nothing like me. And then there's actually a couple scientists also named Heather Russell. So,
I heard from one of those singers when I asked the question about Heather Russell. They said, "Oh, there's a break dancer up in Buffalo."
no, you did not.
I didn't. That was a Zachism.
Uh,
So if you had to leave our audience with a message, what message would you leave our audience with?
I would say that if you're listening to this or seeing this, then you're probably already at a point where you're taking in knowledge and you're curious and you're looking to develop yourself, which is great. I would say that the difference between knowledge and wisdom is execution of action. So, this is the message to say make sure that you're spending at least as much time taking action and doing as you are researching and learning, because it's only in the movement that you learn and that experience then has the opportunity to turn into wisdom.
It's Heather Russell. Heather, it's been such a pleasure having you here. You have this infectious smile, full of joy, full of fun, and I'm honored to have you on our show here. Thank you so much, and keep changing the world, making the world a better place, because I know that that's what you do for many, many people. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate you.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. We're done.